programs, therapeutic horticulture, special events, and Ask a Master Gardener. Today we have an expert Master Gardener, Janet Young, to tell us about our plant clinics. Janet?
Hello, everyone. I have to say that I love all of our Master Gardener programs, but I think plant clinics speak close to my heart. We have 7 in libraries. We have 3 that are in outdoor farmers markets, and 1 is at Brookside Gardens. You may ask, what is a plant clinic? Well, this is simply an opportunity for you, any gardener, to come to our table and ask a specific question or challenge you have in your garden. It's always advisable to bring a photograph of the problem, maybe a specific photograph, and then a larger photograph that has the entire plant so you can see where the plant lives. And a specimen is even more helpful. Now, you may have noticed that we haven't been at plant clinics, understandably so because of the pandemic, but we are highly optimistic to be at our plant clinics as soon as the University of Maryland and the state of Maryland decide that it's safe for us to be out there. So what I suggest is that you continue to check our Facebook page and our website, because that's where you'll see when we'll be out there. You might want to go out there now and check out the locations, times, and dates that they are going to be available.
Please contact us if you have any gardening questions or questions regarding any of our programs that we've mentioned or have on our website, which will be posted shortly. And please remember to include your email in case we need to follow up with you. You can also view previously answered questions from In the Garden on YouTube. Anything else before we get started?
Goodness.
Okay. Huh?
I think we're good.
Okay. Since our final program last year, we have had some amazing questions sent in. I'm just gonna play with this a little bit. Okay, so our first question is about ground covers, and Janet is going to take this one. The question is, this gentleman, Bobby Lippman from Montgomery County, asks, I was wondering whether you could provide a list of ground covers that meet all these criteria: non-toxic to dogs, deer resistant, rabbit resistant, smother weeds, low or no maintenance, for example, no watering required, and do well in poor soil. There's 2 locations that I have. One is in an area that gets lots of sun and another in an area that gets some sun. Janet?
Alyssa, I wonder if you'd want to read the second question as well, because the answers really address both of those questions, so we could probably cover them that way.
Sure. The second question was sent in by Jill Kronstadt from Montgomery Village. And that was, I saw on your Facebook posts that the Uonomous Fortunai I had just ordered is listed as invasive in Maryland. Unfortunately, it was too late to cancel the shipment. I now have 4 of them, Emerald Gaiety, and I don't know where or if it's safe to plant them. The nursery company refunded me and suggested containers. My original plan was to use them as ground cover to keep weeds down in a mostly sunny area and a part shade area. On a related note, is there something other than vinca that's evergreen, adaptable, and looks good with bronze and purple foliage?
Terrific. Just before we start with the answers, just 3 quick comments about ground covers in general. Just a general reminder to everyone not to use invasive plants such as English ivy, Japanese pachysandra, or vinca are examples, because they simply overrun our native plants and really wreck our ecosystem. The second thing to consider about ground covers is that don't expect your ground cover to completely take over the area in a year. It may take as many as 3 years. A funny rhyming statement says, the first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. And finally, we do use them to smother weeds, but keep in mind that weeds will sometimes get in, and the best time to get after that is in the early spring before your ground cover has fully revived. Okay, let's take a look at the answers here. Our researchers have done a great job and identified 10 that you could consider for your garden. Just about all of them meet the requirements that our first questioner had, and several of them are evergreens. What I've done is divide them into 3 different categories according to height, because we didn't know what kind of height plants people were interested in. So we have low, which is 1 to 3 inches, medium, which is 6 inches to a foot, and then high, which is 2 feet. So we have 2 in the low category. The first one is creeping thyme, or Thymus cerfilium. This is an evergreen. Grows in the sun and it stabilizes banks. And in common with the herb thyme, the leaves can be used to eat and for cooking, but in addition, they produce a glorious bounty of colorful flowers that range in different shades of lavender. So that's a nice ground cover if you like that color. A second low growing variety is Sedum, a creeping variety called stonecrop. They grow in sun to part shade. These tolerate hot and dry conditions in poor soils. They will deal with a fair amount of rain, but you cannot grow them in soil that is constantly moist or puddles. The sedum is deer and rabbit resistant, and it's also a native. So the next category of medium, I think we have 5 in that category. We have a Pachysandra procumbens, also called Allegheny serge, which is a native, and it grows in part shade. Now it can overrun may be hard to control, but recommendations at some sites say if you see some arising at a quick location that you don't want, you might be able to heavily mulch to remove that problem. A second one is Lorope spicata. This is easy care, sun to shade, sandy to average soil. It's deer and rabbit resistant. And it produces dense and spreading mounds. You also get lavender spikes in June and July. The next one is called barrenwort. This is an evergreen. It's also called fairy wings. It can grow to a height of 1 foot. Deer and rabbit resistant, lance-shaped leathery leaves with burgundy edges. So this might be a good candidate that our second questioner might want to check out. It produces flowers that can range from white to pink to lavender, many different colors, so you'd want to check out the particular variety or cultivar. The next one is Carex pennsylvania, which is also called Pennsylvania sedge. It's a native, it grows in partial shade, and it can also grow in the sun, but it likes a moist environment. It grows like a grass-like dense mat, if you're interested in seeing a grass-like structure. It's, okay. And then the last of the medium's height in growth is called pussy toes or plantain leaf. It's deer resistant, grows in part shade. Its leaves are 2 inches in size, and it's a woolly matted plant, so it has a very interesting look to it. And this can be used to stabilize banks. And for the high, we have 3 varieties. We have catmint, which is the particular cultivar that's recommended is Walker's Low. It grows in the sun and it can stabilize a bank. Now, as you might realize, mint can grow extensively in your garden, but this particular cultivar is supposed to be sterile. But again, if it spreads to locations that you do not want it to, you can certainly mulch heavily, and that should take care of it. The second one is Jasmine nudiflorum, also called winter jasmine. This is a semi-evergreen, deer and pest resistant. Now this one specifically said it was not toxic to dogs. I'll add that it was a little difficult to find out if some of these were specifically resistant to dogs. Not all that information was available. This winter jasmine grows in poor soils and it's drought tolerant, and it produces yellow flowers in early spring. And our last high growing plant is called a Christmas fern, and it is an evergreen. It grows to a height of 2 feet. So one thing you might consider is growing initially a low ground cover that grows fairly quickly, and then adding higher plants to introduce to make the environment very, very interesting. And that concludes the total numbers that we can recommend.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next question is about viburnum bark damage, and it's submitted by Mel in Montgomery County, and had a great researcher working on this. What is eating the bark on my viburnum shrubs, and what can I do to save them? This specific damage to leatherleaf viburnum is often misdiagnosed as insect feeding or rodent injury, but it's actually caused by a bird called the yellow-bellied sapsucker. And although insects make up part of its diet, the sapsucker is better known for its boring of numerous holes looking like a corn cob in the bark of live trees to obtain sap, the activity from which it derives its name. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is the only member of the woodpecker family to cause this type of injury. More than 250 species of woody plants are known to be attacked. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is fairly common across Maryland during the winter, but is an extremely rare breeder. To discourage sapsuckers from feeding on a favorite tree, wrap hardware cloth or burlap around the area being tapped, or smear a sticky repellent material such as bird tanglefoot on the bark. And you can find tanglefoot at a garden center or hardware store. And I have that problem, and I'm not very happy with those sapsuckers. All right, next question, Steve.
Yes.
This is about rhododendrons. It's actually two questions, so I'll make them and then you can give your answer.
Okay.
First is what's happening to my rhododendron, how to treat them, and the second was a different person who sent in the question, and that was from Mary, and it was the same, what's wrong with my rhododendron and how do I solve it? You can see by the pictures. Steve?
Okay, sure. So I think the first picture is going to show you some damage to a rhododendron. It was caused earlier, and it could have been most likely caused by a variety of different secondary fungi that will attack rhododendron leaves. So they're going to be attacking the older leaves. The new growth is yet to come out this year. What happens sometimes is that older dead tissue falls away and leaves a ragged edge. Sometimes it's in the center of the leaf, you see a ragged edge. And it gets mistaken for chewing damage from maybe something like a caterpillar. Sometimes you see a ragged edge in the center of the leaf, and that might be caused by winter injury, where that portion of the leaf or even the edges of the leaf get desiccated. Again, the same thing, dries away, leaves this jagged edge, and gets mistaken for chewing damage. So it could be a combination of both those things, winter injury and a fungus. So what happens is that the plant gets stressed, gets predisposed, a fungus, a secondary fungus, and there's a wide variety of them that come in there, and they cause these leaf spots. It's really not too much to do at this point because a lot of that dead tissue is falling away. And sometimes it's just the luck of the winter we had. Sometimes it's harsh, it's more exposed, or there's maybe more ice present on the leaf, which causes desiccation. So I guess the important thing here is that if you see this type of damage, it's not something that's necessary for you to go to apply any type of chemical or insecticide or pesticide or something like that. Hopefully over time, as the plant gets established, you'll be less severe. Maybe mulching the plant a little bit, making sure it's well watered through the growing season, so it's well hydrated. You may see less of that injury, but it's very, very common. It may appear to be more on one cultivar than another. Maybe you can reduce the exposure, maybe the wind, something like that. But it's a very common occurrence. Within about another, I guess 6-8 weeks, the new growth will come out. You really won't even be able to tell too much of that damage is there, and it'll look fine. Now the second question had to do with a rhododendron was a little bit off color, and what you may want to do is to get a soil test done to make sure that your soil pH is in range. If your pH is too high, then certain nutrients won't become available, particularly the metals like iron. Ericaceous plants and like to have the pH a little bit lower. They have a higher need for iron, or they have a little more difficult time getting iron from the soil at a higher pH, so we lower the pH to make the iron more available. Sometimes it gives you more of different rhododendrons, you'll be not as green. Sometimes it can get extreme and you'll see it yellowing in between the veins on the new growth. It could be other nutritional issues there too. So start off with soil test, get that, look at the results. If you need to adjust the pH, do that. You can lower the pH. There's products you can use, sulfur and iron sulfate. Some of your fertilizers will help push the pH down or hold it where it is. Things like muric acid and hollytone, which are high in nitrogen sources that tend to acidify the soil. So those would be good options. And also that will help darken green the plant. But again, I would probably start off with the soil test. If it's a poorly drained site, that could be an issue. That could cause the roots not to be able to pick up the nutrients that are there, even though the pH is fine. So last year, I don't know if you remember, we did have very long periods where the soil was very wet, and sometimes there's a period of very dry. So there's a number of plants that showed some root issues that last year, that normally on established plants you see root issues to show up the first few years, and last year was a little different than that. So even well-established plants came a little bit off color. So if you do decide to use a fertilizer, I would use something that's acidifying, slow release, maybe at a very moderate rate, just try to give you a little more color. But if you have the opportunity, I would get your soil tested. So back to you, Melissa. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, our next question is the peace lily leaf browning. It's submitted by Sean in Montgomery County. It's a great question. What is wrong with my peace lily? Why are the leaves browning and how do I prevent it? Well, this is great, a great house plant. It also grows outdoors in horticulture zones 10 and higher. The peace lily leaves turn black due to fungal infection, lack of humidity, presence of a pest, over-fertilizing, improper amount of light, and or improper choice of potting mix. The natural habitat of the peace lily is the tropical rainforest. The best way to grow them is to imitate those same conditions. Keep the soil moist but not wet, and make sure the container has good drainage. Try to water the plant with chlorine, bicarbonate, and fluoride-free water. It's the common makeup of our tap water, and the salt buildup in the potting soil will cause inefficiency in supplying water to the plant. The salts will take up the water, making it unavailable to the plant's roots. Over-fertilization may increase the acidity in the soil. This will cause chemical imbalance and impair mineral uptake by the roots. Lack of iron, manganese, magnesium, copper, and potassium will result in black portions, leaf tip burn, wilting, and sometimes death of the plant. If this is the case, wash the soil with distilled water to remove the salts and other compounds from the fertilizer. Our next question is about a fig tree not producing fruit. The question is, this fig tree did not produce any fruit last year. It was pruned last fall. Any ideas of what's happening? The fig tree has morning, midday, and afternoon, but no late afternoon sun. The fig produced 3 or 4 years ago when we did not have a severe winter, but not last year. I had only a lot of green last year. The tree is exposed to some wind, no drainage problem, as the area is slightly sloped. Janet?
Okay, so there are a number of possible reasons for lack of fruit. In fact, Melissa had a similar problem, and we are wondering if perhaps the major reason could be uh, cold temperatures. Because when we have winter temperatures that are below 20 degrees, figs may require 2 to 3 growing seasons before they can return to normal fruiting. So it may not be necessarily the season just prior to the problem that was the cold that we had. There are some other possibilities as well. Lack of sufficient sun. Figs require 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. Lack of pollination, although with the common fig, this is cross-pollination is not required, so that is probably not a problem if you have the common fig. They require nearly a neutral pH of 6.5 to 7, and the soil should be well drained and loose. So you could check that as well. And in those periods of drought, you really have to water the fig because they need about an inch of water every other week. Some of the diseases and pests that you may find include root knot nematodes, and you can dig up a small piece of root to examine the root to see if there are nematodes on it. Fig rust is another possibility with small raised bumps on the bottom of leaves, and the yellow leaves drop, and this can weaken the plant, exposing it, as Steve said, to other pests. Pink blight is a light pink velvety fungal growth on dead or dying branches, and what you can do here is to prune out all the dead wood. And finally, leaf blight or thread blight. In this case, the base of the leaves get a brown spot or brown spots, leave irregular holes on the leaf, and then the dead leaves are held together by thin thread-like material. So these are possibilities that you can check for your fig, and it's hard to know at this point in time exactly what the problem might be.
Thank you so much. Great, great answers. Okay, so our next question is about camellia spots. And the Pamela Jansen is the, oh, I'm sorry, Sheila from Montgomery County actually submitted this question. This camellia has spots year round. It's protected by a fence, the house, and an azalea. This problem started about 3 to 4 years ago. Other camellias on the property are doing fine. Steve?
Okay, yeah. So this one, I'm not quite sure that exactly what is happening here. There are many cultivars of camellias, and I've got a few, and they're in my yard, and you see a lot of like diversity in the way that they are the color of the leaves, the density. Um, some of the camellias are quite cold hardy here, others maybe less so. It may be a selection of a camellia that's maybe not as maybe as well suited for our area, so it may be a little more susceptible to secondary fungal leaf spot coming in there, and maybe this got set up through the winter. I'm not sure. It is a little sparse. It is a little bit open. Sometimes you have that when some camellias are just kind of getting still started out. They have a very fibrous root system. It's very close to the soil. Um, During the winter months, it's possible they get desiccated out, and that may lead to secondary fungus. But having them throughout the year, even during the growing season, um, is if it's on the older leaves, it's probably because the leaf material has been weakened. If it occurs on the newer growth, then that's something more serious. That usually doesn't happen with camellias. They usually don't have too many pest problems. You get a couple of insect problems. Deer, of course, love to eat them. But I think this is more of a cultural site related, but also because she mentioned she has many camellias in the yard. This one seems to be appear to have that it is genetic. This one is probably, and I have that with some of mine around. They're not as dense as some cultivars around there. So, um, and they do get viruses too. I'm not sure if this is the case here, but some of the viruses they get, what they do is they show discoloration on the leaf. They really are not all, many plant viruses are not life-threatening. They're more of an aesthetic nuisance issue. So this might take a little closer examination, maybe looking a little more closely at the leaves, getting a little more information. But I think it's primarily a site culture-related issue tied in with because with that cultivar, it's more genetic related to.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks so much. Our next question is about laurels, and it's submitted by Mary in Montgomery County. And the question is, what is damaging my laurel? How can I prevent the damage? It appears you've got Shothole disease, which can be commonly found on cherry laurels, Prunus laceraceus plants. Although it looks like damage from a chewing insect, it probably comes from a disease that's caused by a combination of bacteria and fungal infections. The disease got its name from the fact that the appearance of the circular holes look like it came from a shotgun. The infection usually eats away at the leaf, causing the leaf to fall off. Shothole disease can also be found in camellias, ligustrum, hydrangeas, and ivy. You typically will notice this disease during wet weather months between April and October, and it thrives in wet conditions. Recommendations to control the disease are pruning out the infected parts of the plant and pick up any infected leaves that have fallen onto the ground to prevent further spread of the disease. And check to see if the plant is located in well-drained soil, not planted too deeply, and only mulch no more than 2 to 3 inches around the plant, keeping the mulch several inches away from the base of the plant. Strategically, prune some branches may also increase air circulation. And last but not least, overhead watering is discouraged as it makes the plant more vulnerable to infection. Now, Steve, could you talk about the other thing it could be, the crickets?
Sure. In our area, we have, during the summer, we have tree crickets. And tree crickets are, you may see them or hear them, probably most of us are familiar hearing them, in the summer at night. And they're attracted to porch lights. You'll see them, they're very long, they're very slender. They're almost whitish or light green. And what these tree crickets will do is they are, although cherry laurel is not native, they like the cherry laurel leaf. And they try to chew the cherry laurel leaf, but they can't chew all the way through, so they just chew the top portion down to the lower portion of the leaf, and it leaves sort of a brown, kind of like rusty looking, kind of like scab area right there. Later on, that's going to fall out and leave a jagged, ragged hole. So sometimes people get mistaken that, or maybe a fungus that's causing it when you see that brown spot there. Later on, with the jagged edges, they might mistake it for a chewing insect. It's sometimes you get a fair amount, and most of the time it's just a little bit of damage. It's something I think we just want to try to live with. It's not life-threatening. Maybe that's the good news. People might see this and it might get worse. No, it's probably going to get a little damage each year. Something the plant can tolerate. My feeling is let the tree cricket have a few leaves and just move on from there. But it's not a life-threatening issue.
Great. Thank you so much. Our next question is about lesser celandine. Last year, I learned that the yellow flower in my yard is lesser celandine. In April, I dug up the plants I could find. However, this year, there's even more. How can I control it? Janet?
Okay, kudos to you for identifying it, that it's a problem. It is an invasive species. It's sometimes called fig buttercup. It's a perennial, as you've discovered this year. It's found mainly in moist soils and forested floodplains. And as you can see from the photo, it's a really beautiful plant. It's unfortunate that it's so invasive. And but the good news is that it is possible to remove it. The bad news is it is going to take a fair amount of so-called elbow grease. So the important thing to know is that it can be dug up. Probably that's the best thing, because you want to make sure you get all of the roots. If even a small piece of these tuberous roots are left in the ground, the plant will rejuvenate. You might take a four-bladed fork and go about doing this. Maybe you need to have a lesser celandine party at your place and enlist your friends in digging everything up. But be assured that if you are persistent, you will be able to get rid of this, and maybe look for a different ground cover from question 1 and 2.
Thank you so much. The next question is about transplanting a Dawn Redwood seedling. It's submitted by Aaron in Montgomery County. And the question is, I want to transplant this Dawn Redwood seedling from where it grew to another part of the yard. How big a root ball do I need? Does it have a deep taproot? And can I do it this spring? Steve?
Yeah, took a look at the picture. It looks like the Dawn Redwood's trying to break bud. If 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 they're able to, I would do it as soon as you can. Otherwise, you probably really want to wait till the plant really fully leaves out, the leaves fully expand, and they start to harden off. You could probably try to do it later in the summer, but at that point, you might want to talk yourself into actually moving to the fall. So you can do it. It appears to be about 2.5, 3 feet tall. It's something I think you could do with a little bit of work. You're probably looking at something like a 12 to 15 inch root ball. They generally don't have a tap root, but that's a still pretty good sized root ball to lift up. Hopefully, when you take your spade and you dig around and sort of cut out the area, dig the soil around that, you can look at the root balls kind of holding together. If it's not, what you may want to do is what you've done there, that would excuse me, to cut the roots, increase the density into that root ball, and maybe try it again in the fall and dig it up then. If you think you can get a good root ball up there and hold it and grab it and lift it out, then I would do it right away. Because I know if you put it off, then something often happens again, at least with me, and you put it off again and you put it off again, and the tree is just going to get bigger. And it's a fast growing tree. Probably at this point it's like it's only 18 inches or so growing, but eventually it's going to get to 2 to 3 feet a year. So sooner is better if you want to move this tree, but before you know it, it will get big. So I would try to do it soon.
Thank you so much, Steve. Our last question is about holes in my lawn. It's submitted by Mary Ellen in Montgomery County, and her question is, what is causing these holes in my lawn? How can I prevent the holes? The holes are caused by predatory solitary wasps that don't sting and store arthropods in the ground for their larvae. Predatory wasps may be social, many individuals living in a nest with a queen. Solitary, each female produces and rears her own young, and some are frightening enough to strike terror into our hearts, but these fearsome predators work diligently to control our garden pests. Although all social wasps will defend their nest with a painful sting if disturbed, with a little bit of care on our part, do not disturb the nest, we can avoid raising their ire while benefiting from their appetite for other insects. Solitary wasps, on the other hand, are non-aggressive and don't sting in defense, but only to capture prey. You'd have to handle or sit on one to get stung. As effective predators of many insect pests, wasps are considered beneficial, but a social wasp nest in the wrong place may need to be removed. Important solitary wasp species in Maryland include cicada killer wasps, which we are going to really need this summer, potter wasps, digger and sand wasps, and mud wasps. So there you go. Those are our questions. We have more information on the HGIC part of the Montgomery County or University of Maryland Master Gardener website. And that should be shown as well. Let's see. So if you want to submit a question, go to our link, which should be shown on the screen. Please enter as much detail as possible. Photos are welcome and really important. Cutoff for inclusion in the next session of In the Garden is Friday, April the 16th at 6 p.m. to be answered on Tuesday, April the 20th. Please include your email in case we need to follow up with you, and we'll make every effort to answer your questions on the air, but if we run out of time on the show, we will email you. Bev, do you have any questions that were sent into the comments?
No, I don't have any questions today.
Okay, well, thank you all for helping us here and participating, and thank you all out there for joining us. Our next In the Garden program will be April the 20th. Remember, if you have questions, please contact us at the link on the screen. Thanks so much.